Good morrow, my dear. It's nice to see you this morning. I can only hope you've been well. Did you enjoy the book that I lended you? I'm not asking for it back yet, of course, but I want to be able to hear your thoughts on it, completely removed from the context of when the work was made, why, who it was by, etc., etc., etc. General classic death of the author sort of subjects. Well, generally, the fountainhead is considered slow, even by standards of the time. But the phenomenon around Ayn Rand's work is honestly so intriguing that I'd be curious to see if it would be possible to fully independently ignite the cult of Ayn Rand once more, without either group having knowledge of the other. I almost mean cult in the literal sense of the word, as Ayn Rand's work did indeed serve as a cult text, in that she maintained a following of businessmen who had to fully buy into her objectivism, not just surrounding her philosophy or her views on labor practices, but even on something as simple as a taste in art, could result in effectively an excommunication. I'd be curious to ask if something like that could happen posthumously, without that influence, without any knowledge of an independent group. You just happen to be one of my test subjects. One of the few test subjects I was able to get. The only test subject, my dear. My apologies for another unwarranted test, especially only one that serves to further my own curiosity, and not one that could conceivably be considered mandatory under the guise of an education system. It's rude. You're just one of the only people I know who just happens to have the patience for somebody like me. Somebody who'd ramble on and on about the cult of Ayn Rand at 8 in the morning, in the half hour we just happen to have before our classes. I like to share this information to all those who will listen, and you are the only one who doesn't allow my words to fall on deaf ears. It only seems natural in my mind that I'd escalate the exercises, but I can understand how it could conceivably feel like a leap if you are not privy to those specific thoughts. I'll try to rein in my more incessant traits for the sake of the future. I appreciate you saying that, but it truly isn't necessary if you are honestly uncomfortable with me and my studies. Just say the word, and I'll do what I can to ease up on them. Now, how was your morning? How was your evening? Oh, how curious. A love letter, you say? Left on your bed? My, the implications of this are quite intriguing, wouldn't you say? Well, the implications are either that somebody was able to force their way into your homestead with either you or your parents knowing, and leave without a trace, or that somebody was able to enter your house by the will of those things within the homestead and leave without a second thought. Those are two very different things. Both could be perpetuated by someone who knows you quite well, but only one of those could be done by someone you don't know. That means, if we're playing this as if it were, say, the Monty Hall problem, this would make this person, this admirer. More likely to be someone you know, and someone you're close to, rather than someone you don't, if we're assuming this is an act of probability. I'll agree that I was within your homestead for a time that night, but, if you'll recall, that was just a drop of a textbook of yours. I didn't step foot in your room at all, and your parents, in all their amiableness, didn't take their eye off me for the whole time I was within their presence, so it couldn't have been me. Though, I'll admit, I understand if you're suspicious. I look more like a stalker than most. Courtesy doesn't exactly carry through to its fullest extent if one is not willing to approach me and allow me to be so. I guess I just thought... Never mind. Let's get back to analyzing what we can from the note. Even taking probability out of the equation, it's more likely for you to be admired by somebody close to you, the same way that you're more likely to be attacked or murdered by someone within your circles than somebody outside of them. How does this make you feel, if you don't mind my clinical tone? The idea that someone so close to you admires you so deeply, even if it manifests in a way that could be considered by most to be somewhat unconventional. I assure you, if this was another one of my experiments, I would have disclosed it to you by now. I am not going to put my personal curiosity over your well-being and happiness. And besides, this exercise would be completely counterproductive at this point if I were to carry on as I have been. Well, in the hypothetical situation that this were merely a hypothetical situation, I, or somebody else so keen to test you in this manner, it would be analyzing how you respond to highly randomized displays of affection to determine how to act in the future. The hypothesis would probably rely on you responding positively, but the idea of you responding so horrified and so openly negatively would probably render this experiment something of a fail state. Not something that couldn't be tweaked and modified to better play to your emotions and your standards on this long line of experiments, but nonetheless, I am just assuming that there were other experiments conducted, but it would make sense to build on them, would it not? If it were my investigation, that's what I would do. If it were my experiment, I'd probably perform a few exercises to create positive associations between me and you, and the things I'd be willing to do. From there, I'd work to integrate my way into their lives, and not just force unconscious positive connotations, but rather conscious positive interactions, experiences, and memories. This would be around the time where I would experiment with various responses to basic love languages. How would you react if I said why? How would you react if I touched your hand? And how long would it take for you to say something in regards to that? Etc., etc., etc. Of course, after following those stages, I'd probably experiment in both more private as well as more public forms of affection to see their response, and how much they truly and honestly allow. I suppose if I were operating in the same mindset, this would be around the time I would place a love letter. A love letter that doesn't just act as an open declaration of affection and adoration and admiration at this point, but implicit acknowledgement in regards to my ability to worm my way into not just your life, but your heart. And if I am not truly your heart yet, it wouldn't take very much more digging to reach it. Of course, this is simply how I would run such an experiment, if I were to do so. There's no guarantee that this letter was placed with that much intent behind it, as the exercises that I propose practically necessitates out of the gate that this is done with months and months upon months of build-up behind it. And from what I know, I'm practically your closest friend, so it's unlikely that this would be what was happening. After all, who else would really run several months' worth of experiments simply to track your expressions and reactions but me? This might be somebody close to you, but not as close to you as I would be, which leaves the option open for them to act far more erratically and spontaneously than we may yet be capable of understanding. But rest assured, I will stay by your side for as long as you allow me to, and we will reach the bottom of this mystery together. After all, I still haven't taken a look at the contents of the letter. This is what I've been able to gather merely from the implication of its existence. There's so much more that could be found out. And is it not a wonderful day for learning?